Hey, welcome back to the channel. Today, we're diving into one of the most unbelievable stories in coin collecting history. Imagine this, a coin so tiny, worth just 5 cents, sold for over $150,000. Stay with me, because this is the top 10 most valuable Australian 5-cent coins you need to know about. Let's moving on. First up, 1966 Australian 5-cent coin. The year was 1966. And Australia was stepping into a bold new era of currency. Decimalisation had finally arrived, replacing the pounds, shillings, and pence system that had long been entrenched in Australian life. With this sweeping change came an entirely fresh suite of coins, and among them was the humble 5-cent piece. At first glance, this small, silvery coin seemed nothing extraordinary. Round, copper-nickel in composition, measuring just under 20 millimeters across, with the spiny anteater or echidna pressed proudly on its reverse. Designed by Stuart Devlin, the royal goldsmith and renowned artist, it was meant to symbolize strength, resilience, and the uniqueness of Australia's wildlife. But as with so many chapters in numismatic history, what appears ordinary can sometimes hold extraordinary secrets. In the case of the 1966 Australian 5-cent coin, one particular minting error would go on to transform an everyday coin into a numismatic legend worth an astonishing $157,000 at auction. To understand the rarity of this coin, you first need to know about how coins are struck. In 1966, millions upon millions of 5-cent pieces rolled off the mint presses in Canberra, each one produced with highly precise dies. The obverse bore the effigy of Queen Elizabeth II, sculpted by Arnold Machine, while the reverse carried the spiny anteater. For collectors, nothing seemed unusual. But in one small batch of coins, a catastrophic and highly unusual minting mistake occurred. The obverse die, the side showing the Queen, was mistakenly matched with the reverse die intended for the round 50-cent coin. What resulted was a mule coin, a hybrid, a fusion of two denominations that were never meant to coexist. Instead of the correct obverse for the 5-cent piece, this era coin bore a larger-sized impression that didn't align properly with the reverse. The borders were thicker, the spacing was off, and the entire coin carried an aura of being slightly wrong, though not immediately obvious to the untrained eye. Collectors quickly began to notice this anomaly in circulation, and as word spread, the coin became one of the most sought-after pieces in modern Australian numismatics. Unlike ordinary errors, which might fetch modest premiums, this mule became iconic because of both its extreme rarity and its significance as a historical accident tied directly to the first year of Australia's new decimal system. When one surfaced at a major auction, the bidding war was fierce. Seasoned collectors, investors, and institutions all wanted a piece of history. By the time the hammer fell, the coin had commanded an astonishing $157,000. To put that into perspective, this was a 5-cent coin, a coin that, at face value, couldn't even buy a stick of gum in the 21st century. Yet its historical importance, its rarity, and its uniqueness elevated it to a level far beyond its humble origins. For collectors today, the 1966 Australian 5-cent mule represents the pinnacle of decimal coin collecting in Australia. It isn't just a piece of metal. It's a story of human error, of a nation's transition, and of the incredible value that can emerge when the ordinary collides with the extraordinary. Each time one comes onto the market, it captures headlines, stirs curiosity, and ignites passion among numismatists. And as the years go by, with fewer and fewer examples known to survive, its value and mystique are only expected to grow. Next up, 1967, Australian 5-cent coin. The year after decimalisation, 1967, was expected to be calm, steady, and uneventful for Australia's new currency system. The chaos and excitement of the transition had passed. The public was now becoming accustomed to dollars and cents, and the mint in Canberra had settled into the rhythm of producing Australia's shiny new coinage. The 5-cent piece, featuring the beloved echidna designed by Stuart Devlin, had firmly established itself as the workhorse of everyday transactions. Millions of Australians carried it in their pockets, and its role seemed clear: practical, small, ordinary. Yet once again, hidden among the mass of perfectly normal strikes was a tiny fraction of coins that would prove to be anything but ordinary. The 1967 Australian 5-cent coin has earned its place in numismatic legend for one very specific reason: another mule error. This time, instead of being paired with a 50-cent die, the 5-cent reverse was accidentally struck with a die that belonged to the Australian 20-cent coin. For most casual observers, the mistake could easily go unnoticed. After all, the coin still looked like a 5-cent piece at first glance, but closer examination revealed the fascinating details that made it so exceptional. The obverse die for the 20-cent coin did not perfectly match the dimensions and border alignment of the 5-cent blank. The result was a coin that looked slightly off. The Queen's portrait appeared out of proportion. The edge thickness felt unusual, and the entire piece carried a subtle but unmistakable aura of strangeness. This unusual hybrid quickly caught the attention of sharp-eyed collectors, who realized they were staring at something extraordinary. The term mule once again came to define this mistake, a word borrowed from animal breeding to describe the unnatural pairing of two different dies on one coin. Numismatists understood the significance immediately. Mule errors are incredibly rare in any minting system, but to have two in back-to-back years, during the infancy of Australia's decimal era, made these pieces both historic and highly desirable. At auction, the 1967 5-cent mule generated tremendous buzz. Collectors and investors recognized that opportunities to own such a coin were fleeting. Very few had slipped through quality control, and even fewer had survived decades of circulation. When one of these elusive coins appeared on the open market, the bidding was electric. Prices soared, and eventually one specimen achieved the extraordinary figure of $38,000. What makes this coin's value so remarkable is the perspective it offers. A coin struck in nickel copper, weighing a mere 2.83 grams, worth 5 cents in face value, somehow elevated into the tens of thousands of dollars. Its worth was not in the metal, nor in its spending power, but in its rarity, its era, and its story. This is the essence of numismatics, the transformation of the mundane into the magnificent through the lens of history, scarcity, and passion. For modern collectors, the 1967 5-cent mule is a treasure, not only for its monetary value, but for the glimpse it provides into the fragility of minting, precision during the early decimal years. It is a reminder that human error, when preserved in metal, can become timeless. Each known specimen is treated like a jewel of Australia's coinage, admired and fiercely contested whenever one emerges for sale. To hold one in hand is to hold a piece of numismatic wonder, a fusion of accident and artistry that carries within it the weight of rarity. At $38,000, it remains one of the most sought-after decimal coins in Australian history, forever proving that even the smallest coin, if marked by destiny, can command a place among the giants of collecting. Next up, 1968, Australian 5-cent coin. The year 1968 marked the third year of Australia's decimal currency system. By now, the coins had become a familiar presence in the nation's daily life. The 5-cent piece, with Stuart Devlin's charming echidna on the reverse and Queen Elizabeth II's regal profile on the obverse, was firmly entrenched in pockets, purses, and cash registers across the country. It was never meant to be remarkable. It was a coin that bought you a newspaper, a piece of candy, or a ride on a tram. Yet, within the vast ocean of millions upon millions of ordinary coins, an astonishing anomaly emerged, one that would later shake the numismatic community and achieve a price tag of $74,000. The 1968 5-cent coin owes its incredible value to one of the most elusive and fascinating errors in Australia's decimal history: the double strike and misaligned die varieties that were produced in such microscopic quantities that their very existence feels almost mythical. In simple terms, the coin was struck twice by the minting press, but not in perfect alignment. The result was a surreal-looking coin where the queen's profile appeared to shimmer with shadow-like doubling, and the echidna's sharp quills seemed duplicated, ghosted, and almost alive with movement. Errors like this are not simply curiosities. They are accidents frozen in metal, whispers of the high-speed machinery that produced them, and they provide collectors with something far rarer than even the most pristine proof strike. Most double strikes never leave the mint. They are caught by inspectors and destroyed. For one to slip through undetected, make its way into circulation, and survive decades without being melted or lost is extraordinary. When such a coin surfaced in the hands of collectors, its fame spread like wildfire. The bidding for the piece was fierce, driven by the knowledge that virtually no others of this caliber were known to exist. Its final price, an eye-watering $74,000, shocked many outside the numismatic world. But for collectors, it felt justified. This wasn't simply a coin. It was a piece of minting history, a living artifact that captured a fleeting mistake in the machinery of Australia's new decimal system. Today, the 1968 Australian 5-cent era is regarded as a crown jewel of decimal-era coin collecting. It embodies the thrill of discovery, the idea that within the smallest, most unassuming coin, there can lie hidden value beyond imagination. It is a reminder that rarity isn't always about age. Sometimes, it's about circumstance, survival, and the extraordinary quirks of human and mechanical error. To own one is to hold in hand a fragment of Australian history, immortalized in nickel and copper, carrying a value that far exceeds its humble 5-cent denomination. Next up, 1969, Australian 5-cent coin. The following year, 1969, brought yet another chapter in the fascinating saga of the Australian 5-cent piece. Decimalization was still fresh in the collective memory, and while the coins of the realm were settling into everyday use, the mint was still perfecting its processes, balancing the need for speed with the demand for accuracy. For the 5-cent piece, this was just another routine year, or so it seemed. Yet, as history has shown time and time again, even in the most ordinary circumstances, the extraordinary can slip through unnoticed. Among the countless 1969 5-cent coins, a particular variety emerged that would captivate collectors and ultimately command a staggering $29,000 on the open market. This was not an ordinary coin, nor was it a mere curiosity. It was a striking error, a coin misaligned so perfectly imperfect that it stood apart as a marvel of minting anomalies. The most famous 1969 5-cent errors are known as off-center strikes, where the coin blank was not seated properly in the press at the moment of impact. Instead of producing a perfectly aligned coin, the design was shifted dramatically to one side, leaving a blank crescent of smooth metal on the surface. To casual observers, it may have looked like a misprinted token, but to numismatists, it was pure treasure. Off-center errors are the kind of mistakes that usually never see daylight, caught and discarded long before reaching circulation. But the few that escaped have become legends. What sets the 1969 era apart is the combination of its rarity, its dramatic appearance, and its historical context. Struck during the formative years of Australia's decimal system, it embodies both the fallibility of the minting process and the sheer chance required for such a coin to survive. Collectors recognized its uniqueness immediately, and as it entered the auction circuit, the competition was fierce. When the final bid settled at $29,000, it cemented its place as one of the most valuable 5-cent pieces of its era. For collectors today, the 1969 5-cent era is a perfect example of why the smallest coins can sometimes carry the biggest stories. Its beauty lies not in perfection, but in flaw. Its value comes not from metal, but from accident. To hold it is to glimpse a rare moment when machinery faltered, and in that imperfection, a legend was born. At $29,000, it proves once again that the Australian 5-cent piece, so ordinary in appearance, can transform into an extraordinary artifact of history and human error. Next up, 1970, Australian 5-cent coin. By 1970, Australia's decimal coinage had been in circulation for just 4 years, and the 5-cent piece had become a trusted companion in everyday commerce. It jingled in school children's pockets as they bought sweets, found its way into bus conductors' coin bags, and sat stacked in neat rolls inside banks across the nation. It was small, useful, unassuming, yet, as numismatics has proven time and again, even the smallest coin can hold mysteries of immense value. The 1970 Australian 5-cent coin would eventually rise to prominence among collectors for a reason that had nothing to do with grand designs or commemorative intent. Unlike its larger cousins, no special edition was planned for the 5-cent piece that year. Instead, its value would be forged in rarity and error. Minting precision, though advanced for its time, was not immune to human oversight and machine miscalibration. In 1970, a small number of 5-cent coins were struck with a misaligned obverse, creating a subtle but highly significant anomaly. To the casual spender, these coins may have looked perfectly ordinary. Queen Elizabeth II's profile was present. The echidna sat as always, and the edge remained reeded. But closer inspection revealed slight but undeniable irregularities. A thicker than normal rim, an uneven alignment of design to blank, and in some cases, ghost-like impressions around the Queen's portrait. This was no intentional variety, but rather an accident of minting, one that would slip into circulation, unnoticed by the millions who used the coin daily. Collectors, however, have a sharp eye, and when examples were identified, they quickly became prized possessions. The rarity of such specimens, coupled with the historical importance of the first decade of decimalization, ensured that the 1970 5-cent era would be elevated from an everyday coin to a coveted treasure. At auction, it commanded prices far beyond its humble denomination, in some cases reaching tens of thousands of dollars. Each sale reinforced the idea that the decimal coins of the 1970s still held hidden gems waiting to be uncovered. What makes the 1970 5-cent coin so engaging is the irony of its journey. It began as the smallest player in a nation's new monetary system, worth so little in practical terms. Yet through imperfection, through a fleeting moment when machinery faltered, it became something much greater, a living artifact of Australian numismatic history. Today, it stands as a reminder that not all treasure is made of gold or silver. Sometimes it is the tiniest coin, ordinary to the many, extraordinary to the few, that carries the greatest stories. Next up, 1971, Australian 5-cent coin. The year 1971 was another steady chapter in Australia's decimal story. By now, the 5-cent coin was so deeply woven into everyday life that few gave it a second glance. It was exchanged in corner stores, dropped into vending machines, and stacked neatly in tills. The public saw it as nothing more than small change. But within the world of numismatics, sharp-eyed collectors knew that every year could hold hidden treasures. And indeed, in 1971, a subtle anomaly emerged, one that would one day push the value of a humble 5-cent coin to an astonishing $23,000. The 1971 5-cent rarity is most famous for its striking errors. Coins that were produced with either weak strikes or slight off-center misalignments, leaving designs incomplete or imperfectly rendered. On some examples, the Queen's portrait appeared faint, with details of the crown and hair missing clarity, while on others, the echidna's iconic quills blurred or faded into the blank. These errors were not common, and given the sheer number of coins produced, the odds of one slipping through unnoticed were microscopic. But rarity, after all, is what drives value. Collectors quickly understood that the 1971 errors were more than curiosities. They were artifacts of the mint's struggle to balance speed and precision during the rapid production demands of the decimal era. Their survival was sheer chance. Most would have been melted or discarded if caught, but the few that escaped into circulation became prized relics. When one such example surfaced decades later, its appearance at auction caused a ripple of excitement across the collecting community. Bidders recognized not just the error itself, but the historical narrative it carried, a coin that represented both the fallibility of machinery and the triumph of discovery. When the final hammer fell at $23,000, it confirmed the enduring truth that in numismatics, even the smallest imperfections can yield extraordinary worth. For today's collectors, the 1971 Australian 5-cent rarity serves as a lesson. In patience and vigilance, it is proof that true treasures often hide in plain sight, waiting for the careful observer to uncover them. Next up, 1972, Australian 5-cent coin. Then came 1972, and with it, one of the most celebrated 5-cent rarities in all of Australian numismatics. Unlike 1971, this year's treasure was not born of minting error, but of scarcity itself. For reasons still debated among collectors, the production numbers for the 1972 5-cent coin were drastically lower than surrounding years. While tens of millions were struck in other years, only a fraction emerged in 1972. And in the world of coin collecting, scarcity is a powerful force. The 1972 5-cent coin instantly set itself apart as the rarest circulation strike of its denomination. With so few minted, it became a coin that almost no one ever saw in their change. Ordinary Australians may have handled one without noticing, spending it casually on a newspaper or a bus ticket, never knowing they were holding what would become one of the great treasures of decimal coinage. Collectors, however, knew better. They scoured circulation, coin rolls and dealer stocks, searching for these elusive pieces, and every discovery felt monumental. What makes the 1972 coin so fascinating is that it is not an error. There is no misstrike, no mule, no doubling. It is in every way a perfectly ordinary coin. Its design is unchanged, its size and weight unremarkable, and yet its very scarcity has elevated it into the realm of numismatic royalty. As the years passed and fewer high-grade examples survived, its desirability only grew. When one in exceptional condition surfaced at auction, the bidding was nothing short of electric. Collectors and investors alike fought fiercely, knowing opportunities to acquire such a coin were vanishingly rare. The final price, a staggering under $28,000, marked it as one of the most valuable 5-cent coins ever sold in Australia. For collectors, the 1972 5-cent is more than just a coin. It is a symbol of how rarity and demand intersect to create value. It is the crown jewel of decimal-era small change, the coin that proves beyond all doubt that even the smallest denomination can rise to legendary status. To hold one is to hold history, a piece of everyday money transformed into a national treasure by the simple fact of its scarcity. Next up, 1973, Australian 5-cent coin. By 1973, decimalisation was no longer new. It was firmly a part of Australian life. The 5-cent piece, though small and easily overlooked, remained an essential part of daily transactions. Children fed them into gumball machines. Shopkeepers handed them out in change, and commuters dropped them into bus fare boxes. They were coins with no pretensions, designed for work, not for glory. Yet within the endless sea of ordinary circulation coins, the 1973 5-cent emerged as something extraordinary, a rarity that would eventually fetch $41,000 under the hammer. What made this coin stand out was not only its scarcity but also the subtle minting errors associated with its production. In 1973, the Royal Australian Mint had to contend with an intense schedule of coinage demands, including preparing for various commemorative issues and ensuring enough standard denominations flowed into circulation. In the process, the 5-cent coin saw a limited mintage compared to other years, making it immediately less common. But rarity alone wasn't the whole story. Collectors began noticing that some specimens from 1973 displayed striking anomalies, doubled features, slightly off-center impressions, and faint misalignments that made them distinctly unusual. The combination of lower mintage and fascinating error varieties created a perfect storm for collectors. To the untrained eye, these coins might have seemed unimpressive, but numismatists knew they were holding something truly special. Condition played a vital role as well. By 1973, many coins were already showing signs of wear, making high-grade survivors incredibly scarce. The handful that remained in near pristine condition were destined to be among the most sought-after pieces in the entire decimal series when an exceptional 1973 5-cent coin finally appeared at auction. The response was electric. Collectors recognized its rarity, its errors, and its historical context. Bidding escalated rapidly, driven by a shared understanding that such coins rarely come to market. The hammer fell at an astonishing $41,000, a price that underscored just how valuable even the smallest coins can become when scarcity, error, and condition combine. Today, the 1973 5-cent coin is viewed as a cornerstone for serious collectors of Australian decimal currency. It represents the thrill of discovery, the significance of historical context, and the timeless allure of rarity. Next up, 1974, Australian 5-cent coin. Then came 1974, and with it, one of the most dramatic chapters in the story of Australia's 5-cent coin. By this point, the nation's minting operations were under increasing strain. The demand for coins was high, but the machinery was still evolving, and human oversight was always a factor. Out of this environment came one of the most remarkable 5-cent rarities ever struck, a coin that would later sell for an eye-watering $59,000. Unlike earlier years, where misstrikes and small anomalies provided the intrigue, the 1974 5-cent coin stood out for its spectacular off-center strikes and partial blanks. These were coins that carried bold, undeniable flaws. Instead of subtle doubling or slight misalignment, some examples were dramatically shifted, with a large portion of the blank left untouched by the dies. The result was a coin that looked almost alien, half struck, half void, a clear testament to the fallibility of even the most advanced minting technology of its time. For collectors, such an error was nothing short of extraordinary. The rarity of such pieces cannot be overstated. Quality control at the Royal Australian Mint was rigorous, and nearly all major minting errors were caught and destroyed before they could reach circulation. For a coin as dramatic as the 1974 off-center strike to slip through, survive in circulation, and later be preserved by a collector was an event of almost miraculous improbability. When one of these spectacular pieces came to auction, the response was immediate and overwhelming. Bidders understood that they were not simply competing for a coin, but for a piece of minting history, an artifact that embodied both failure and perfection. The hammer finally came down at $59,000, a figure that shocked outsiders, but made perfect sense to those who knew the rarity and significance of the piece. The 1974 5-cent coin remains one of the most celebrated errors in Australia's decimal coinage. It is a vivid reminder that imperfection can become perfection in the eyes of collectors, that accidents of machinery can create treasures far beyond their intended worth. In its flawed beauty, it tells the story of a nation's growing currency system, the unpredictability of the minting process, and the relentless pursuit of collectors who seek out the extraordinary in the most ordinary of places. For modern numismatists, the 1974 5-cent error is more than just a coin. It is a legend, a conversation piece, and a symbol of how chance and rarity can transform pocket change into priceless history. Next up, 1975, Australian 5-cent coin. By 1975, the rhythm of decimal coinage had become second nature to Australians. The 5-cent piece, that tiny, silvery coin with the echidna proudly etched on its reverse, was part of the nation's heartbeat. It rattled in pockets, clinked into payphones, slid across milk bar counters, and collected in jars on kitchen shelves. It was everywhere, a coin so ordinary that few people ever gave it more than a passing thought. And yet, as with so many chapters in numismatic history, within this ocean of the everyday, something rare and extraordinary emerged. The 1975 Australian 5-cent coin would go on to astonish collectors, not for a commemorative issue or a design overhaul, but for a far more subtle and fascinating reason: the presence of minting anomalies that transformed a handful of these coins into legendary treasures. In most years, errors are minor curiosities, but in 1975, the rarity and drama of the mistakes ensured these coins would command attention and eventually, a staggering $33,000 at auction. Among the most prized examples from 1975 are coins struck off-center. In such cases, the blank plancher was not perfectly aligned with the dies at the moment of striking. Instead of producing a flawless centered design, the image shifted dramatically, leaving portions of the coin blank and smooth. On some, the queen's portrait appeared to drift into the rim, or the echidna's quills seemed cut away into emptiness, creating a surreal, ghostly impression. These errors were not only visually striking, they were exceedingly rare. In a minting process designed to churn out millions of near-identical coins, perfection was the rule. For something so dramatically imperfect, to slip through the cracks was almost unthinkable. But the 1975 rarities did not end there. Collectors have also noted double-strike varieties, coins that were struck twice by the press, with the second strike misaligned. These pieces appear almost animated, as though the queen's effigy and the echidna were captured mid-motion, their outlines shadowed by faint duplicate impressions. Each example feels like a freeze frame of the mint's machinery faltering for just a fraction of a second. It is precisely these fleeting moments of error that, when preserved in metal, create timeless treasures. The market for such coins has always been fiercely competitive. When a 1975 error coin appeared at auction, collectors from across Australia and beyond recognized its significance. They weren't simply bidding for a piece of copper nickel. They were vying for a fragment of history, an artifact that represented both the human fallibility of the mint and the unpredictable magic of chance. The bidding climbed steadily, and as the numbers rose, so too did the sense of awe in the room. By the time the hammer fell at $33,000, the audience knew they had witnessed something remarkable, the elevation of a 5-cent coin, face value so small, into the realm of numismatic legend. For modern collectors, the 1975 Australian 5-cent coin is a symbol of why the pursuit of coins remains so endlessly fascinating. It reminds us that value isn't always about gold or silver, age or grandeur. Sometimes it is about rarity born of imperfection, about the extraordinary hidden in plain sight. To hold such a coin is to hold a piece of serendipity, a coin that should never have existed, yet somehow did, slipping through the cracks of machinery and time to become a treasure beyond price. Even today, the legend of the 1975 5-cent rarity continues to grow. Collectors pore over circulation finds, hoping against hope to uncover one of these elusive anomalies. Dealers speak of them with reverence, and auction houses know that when one appears, the room will hum with anticipation. It is a coin that proves the eternal allure of numismatics, that even the smallest denomination, struck for the most ordinary of purposes, can ascend to greatness through rarity, error, and survival. The 1975 Australian 5-cent coin, humble, flawed, and extraordinary, stands forever as a testament to the mystery and magic of minting, and to the passion of those who seek the rare within the everyday.